Embankment is a station on the District, Circle, Bakerloo and Northern lines that lies just below the much larger Charing Cross. The name Embankment refers to the fact that it lies on the Victoria Embankment, and therein lies a tale. You see, until 1870 this part of London didn't exist. At all. To understand how we got here, literally how we are capable of standing here, we need to go back to the 19th century. During the 18th and 19th centuries, London faced a number of challenges. It was already a major city, but the coming of the Industrial Revolution had attracted unprecedented numbers of people. The city's population exploded. Between 1710 and 1840, the population had grown from 630,000 to 2 million people. These people had to be housed, fed, watered, employed, transported, and then there was the issue of sanitation. At this time, London didn't really have a sewer system per se. A lot of areas didn't even have sewers. Instead, the waste was handled by a number of small, inadequate medieval sewers, by the many rivers in the city, and by a bunch of guys with buckets. The biggest sewer of all was the River Thames, where it all ended up. And the biggest source of drinking water was also the Thames. Now, I'm sure you can see the problem here. But a lot of people couldn't. Until Dr. John Snow's pioneering work on the transmission of cholera became widely accepted, no one really understood the link between polluted water and disease. So despite the warnings of no less an authority than eminent scientist Michael Faraday in 1855, no one did anything about the stinky river. It was just one of those things. That all changed in the 1850s thanks in part to an exciting new invention, the flush toilet. While this was a big improvement on, a bucket, it pushed the Thames to breaking point. Well, that's probably not the right term. It made the river really, 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 really smelly. The authorities attempted to combat this by pouring carbolic acid, lime and chloride of lime into the river, which did almost nothing to help. Unusually hot weather in the summer of 1858 and unusually low tides combined with record amounts of night soil to bring about what became known as the Great Stink. Raw sewage lay several feet deep on the exposed riverbed. A royal cruise had to be abandoned. The medical folk were concerned about disease being carried on the air rising from the Thames, which was how they believed it was transmitted back then. The smell was physically nauseating. You know what's right next to the river? That's right, the Houses of Parliament. As a universal rule of politics, the best way to get members of Parliament to pay attention to an issue is to ensure that it affects them personally, and you can bet they were paying attention to this. Several rooms in Parliament were rendered unusable. Meetings were abandoned. Sheets soaked in chloride of lime were hung in the windows, and it was even suggested that Parliament should abandon London altogether. Cometh the hour, cometh the man. And in this case, the man who cameth was Joseph Bazalgette, chief engineer for the Metropolitan Board of Works, who, as it happened, had devised a total overhaul of the sewers 2 years previously. Bazalgette's sewer network would make an interesting video in itself, and someday perhaps it will, but one of the essential elements of this new network that you need to know about for now was a pair of intercepting sewers constructed along the Thames foreshore. These would collect the sewage before it could hit the river, then take it out of the city. Naturally, the Victorians wouldn't accept plain pipes, so the plan was to turn the sewers into part of a major new development, the Thames Embankments. There were 3, the Chelsea, Albert and Victoria embankments. They were designed by Francis Webb Shields and constructed by Thomas Brassey. The embankments were intended to solve several problems at once. The city streets were extremely congested, so it was planned to build a road along the top. Other utilities, such as water pipes, would run above the sewer. And, of course, the reason we're all here, the Metropolitan District Railway was to use it. Construction of the Metropolitan District Railway was moving at a glacial pace, largely due to money issues. This was partly because their route took them through some of the most expensive parts of London. The line was built using the cut-and-cover method, i.e. dig a trench, lay the track, roof it over. which necessitated demolishing whatever was up above. The Victoria Embankment was rather an attractive prospect because it was land that simply hadn't existed before. This Watergate in Victoria Embankment Gardens originally stood on the Thames foreshore, which shows you just how much land was reclaimed for this. Not that this solved the district's money problems. They were paying a hefty fee to the Metropolitan Railway, who at that time were running the trains. One of their contractors had gone bankrupt in 1867. In an attempt to solve their money issues, they decided to put just about everything into getting the western section of their line built, the bit running through affluent Kensington and Westminster, because they figured this was their best bet for getting a service running and therefore making some of their money back. All very well for them, not so great for the Metropolitan Board of Works. They couldn't complete the embankment until the district pulled their finger out and finished their railway. The board kept pushing the district to be just a little faster if they wouldn't mind awfully. Eventually, on the 30th of May 1870, the district finally completed their line as far as Blackfriars, and the board breathed a sigh of relief. This came with 3 stations: Blackfriars, the Temple, and Charing Cross. Yes, at that time the station wasn't called Embankment, but named instead after the South Eastern Railway terminus next door. As well as the stations, there are a number of ventilation openings visible on the surface, which are a relic of the steam era. In 1906, the Baker Street and Waterloo Railway would arrive, and confusingly would name their station Embankment. Interestingly, a very early version of this line appears on plans for the embankment, at which time it was going to be pneumatically powered. So yes, when Elon Musk talks about the Hyperloop, he is in fact talking about a form of transport that is well over 150 years old. The Baker Street and Waterloo would of course later rename itself the Bakerloo Railway, and then the Bakerloo Line. In 1914, the Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway, which would later become part of the Northern Line, built their own station here. The CCEHR, the Bakerloo and the District, were owned at this time by Underground Electric Railways of London, and this was a convenient place for an interchange between them. The CCEHR's station was a terminus, and a loop line was constructed under the river to enable quick turnaround of trains. In 1926, this line was extended to Kennington, and that means there is now an abandoned tube tunnel under the river here. There was a whole mess of renaming over subsequent decades, and I produced a video about that, which should be popping up in the corner right about now. These days, Embankment also offers interchange with a river pier, and famously it's incredibly close to Charing Cross. As planned by the builders, it offers convenient interchange between the Northern, Bakerloo, District and Circle lines. And it's all thanks to sewage. No wait, hold on, I don't want to end the video like that. I hope you enjoyed this fragrant tale from the tube. If you did, you may wish to waft over to the like button and subscribe for more content that doesn't stink. Thanks as always to my generous donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. You are the intercepting sewer to my flush toilet. And that is the worst metaphor I have ever used. Researching this video has given me lots of other ideas for future videos. I'm thinking a more in-depth look at the sewer system, so to speak, may be rewarding. And how about that pneumatic railway? That's food for thought. Anyway, I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.